Hey everybody, so we are going to have a little herd watching talk this time about whatever else, right? Corona, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it. But let's talk about it right now through the lens of the latest everything new is old again, Democratic talking point, which is obviously the coronavirus is racist. Oh, wait. No, the coronavirus isn't racist. Obviously, America is racist again. So the latest thing is now that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or whatever the hell her name is, Nancy Pelosi, all the usual suspects and assholes have decided that they're going to now dive deep into the mortality data for Corona to dive into the racial disparity because obviously they have nothing else. They've tried very, very hard to drive a wedge between the American people and the administration. They've completely and utterly failed to really make this narrative that Trump ignored things stick, because factually, clearly, he didn't ignore it. They've been trying to drive a wedge in any way they can. Like initially when Trump was like, hey, we have to worry about this thing coming from China, they tried to make him look like a racist and a xenophobe. And then when it turns out there really is a thing from China, they tried to make it look like he had ignored it, which obviously he didn't. And then now that the American public, by and large, is approving of the way Donald Trump is handling it, they're flipping out. Yes, obviously, even of the people that see this stream, about half of you or so probably think this is Donald Trump is doing the worst job in the history of jobs handling this. But then again, you thought Donald Trump was doing the worst job in the history of anything on pretty much everything he's done for 3.5 years. And frankly, that's never going to change. I mean, I love some of you, but you're deep in your world and you're dealing with your sources, and that's true. And I no doubt you believe the same of me, whatever. So let's assume that by and large, 50% of America hates Donald Trump, 50% of America approves Donald Trump. Then when I say that the narrative and the effect is shifting in Donald Trump's favor, I'm talking about the couple of percentage points that actually can be shifted in the middle. And the reality is that, except for a couple of outliers, for the most part, that shifting middle ground, those moderates, approve of the way Donald Trump has been handling the corona situation. And furthermore, the trust in the media, as the media continues to Don Quixote-like attack Donald Trump, the trust in the media is collapsing, which is all to the good for everybody concerned. So with all that failing, the Democrats are picking up, the only sword they have left, the only sword they ever reach for. Once again, the Democrats are going to charge into the fray, screaming they're racist at the top of their lungs, because they have nothing else. Alexandria Cortez, as she makes margaritas in a live stream in her, almost $1 million apartment in Washington, D.C., is screaming about racial inequality while she talks to people from the Bronx who are, dying of corona while she does this. It's just the same tactic over and over. But let's talk about race and corona. So it does look like some of the numbers are showing that minority victims are being disproportionately, if you take the national average, disproportionately hit by the corona epidemic. In other words, if you look at the racial makeup of America as a whole, and then you look at the racial makeup of the people who are passing away from corona, the numbers don't match evenly. They somewhat mean that more minorities are unfortunately passing away from the thing. But this is not because of racism. Certainly the virus doesn't care, and there are no indications that medical professionals are not taking care of patients, turning them away because of their race and whatever. It certainly isn't because at the federal level we're not shipping resources to those areas. The hotspots are getting the vast majority of the federal resources. New York has gotten, an incredible amount of support, money, equipment, hospital ships, military. Cuomo has, mentioned publicly that everything he's asked Donald Trump for, he's gotten, and he's gotten in a timely manner. And the same is true for the other governors who are dealing with hotspots. So the problem is clearly not racism in the response. The problem is clearly not that the virus is racist. The problem is clearly not that the medical community is racist. So you have to take all that out. So what are we left with? We're left with the idea that maybe this is not really about race, that it's in fact about demographics and location, and then we have to start looking at the follow-ons from that. So the hotspots, New York, the poorer sections in New York, the other large cities that are the hotspots, are disproportionately, compared to the rest of America, minority heavy. Urban areas are concentrations of minority population. Urban areas also happen to be the concentrations because of that, whether it's cause or effect, one way or the other, but those areas are also heavily led by Democratic governments and have been for generations. The highest concentrations of minorities are the highest concentration of inhabitants of the worst economic slums in America. Now, that's not their fault. It's not that there's anything inherent with racial minorities that makes them live in slums. It's that the Democratic Party, the left, and the collectivist ideas that they espouse have selectively targeted minority groups and created a cycle of poverty in those groups, right? You concentrate them and you bring them in because you hand out money like there's no tomorrow. So you take minorly economically disadvantaged people and you hand them money, they move to where you are. You hand them money, they elect you. You hand them money, they elect you. More people come. And you wind up concentrating a bunch of people who have become entirely dependent on the government. And you do that because they will never vote you out. Because the other party, the Republican Party, is not a party that's prepared to hand you a ton of money and a ton of welfare and whatever. And now, for better or ill, that's just the choice that those communities have been given. So the reason why you have minorities perishing disproportionately in the Corona situation is because that's the people who are living in the areas that have been destroyed by Democratic policies. They're living in slums. They're living in buildings that are obsolete. They're living in cities with crumbling and destroyed architectures. They're laboring under healthcare systems that are essentially nationalized in their local area. They're completely dependent on governments that are completely broken. Look at, the lead problems in Flint. Look at anywhere the Democrats have been in control for generations, and you're looking at a highly concentrated urban population of incredibly poor people who are incredibly loyal to the Democratic Party, and they're living very densely packed. They're, living very economically disadvantaged. And of course, when you have a pandemic, these are the populations that are going to get hit. And I would say that the problem is not, in fact, racism, in the sense that anybody's standing around going, well, I'd much rather the minorities die of the virus. But it is absolutely a side effect of racial politics. The racial politics in question is that the Democratic Party thrives on having a highly dense, highly concentrated population in urban areas of incredibly poor, incredibly loyal Democratic voters. And so they've created these powder kegs where you're going to get violence, where you're going to get these sort of depressed economic situations. And when you have a pandemic, you're going to have a massive death rate. And it's just a side effect of the way the Democrats have chosen to retain power. When you look at the electoral maps, when you look at the way elections are decided, you see things like, the vast majority of a state will go for a Republican, and then because there are, a significant concentration of people within one city, the entire state is flipped. You look at New Jersey. New Jersey is solidly Democratic because Trenton and Newark are incredibly highly democratic. Once again, concentrated groups of economically disadvantaged, poor, mostly racial minorities who are incredibly loyal voters for the Democrats and supporting the very policies that are keeping them concentrated, poor, and dependent on the government. The Democrats have no intention of changing this, and they've created a vulnerable situation. And it's no coincidence that those same governments that have created these populations are the same governments that are utterly incapable at a state level of managing this crisis. And those are the same governments that are doing what they're always going to do, what collectivist, leftist governments will always do, which is they will scream for a larger government to solve the problem. So the leftist government at the state level is amass power, and then as soon as it fails, it wants a larger government to amass power. And when they fail at that level, they would scream for the UN to be responsible, because it's always in the leftist mind that they'll simply try and solve the problem by reaching out to a wider group and stealing the resources from ever more people until there are no more resources left to steal to solve their problems. So obviously, you know, Brooklyn is looking to New York. New York is looking New York City. New York is looking to the New York State. New York State is looking to the federal government. And now Andrew Cuomo wants to directly raid and steal the medical equipment from other states. They want the federal government to actually go to other states and forcibly remove equipment and ship it in, because there is no limit to the amount of resources that other people have that a left-wing government isn't willing to go and steal at the slightest justification. Anyway, so you're going to see Nancy Pelosi, you're going to see occasional Cortex, as she's known. You're going to see the left-wing party as a whole launch into this sort of racial narrative, saying that because America is racist, the minorities live in poverty, because the poverty is what it is, then they're getting more heavily hit with the virus. And what they will always sidestep, what they will always manage to leave out of the conversation, is that these places, these poor, ravaged, destroyed cities, and these populations that are constantly under the grinding boot of poverty and government dependency and drug dependency and all of these ills, those are all in Democratic controlled areas, and not recently democratically controlled for generations, and controlled under Democratic federal governments. You cannot blame the Republicans. You cannot blame the right. You cannot blame, unfortunately, I hate to tell you, you can't blame white people as a whole for this problem. The Democrats have created this. The Democratic states are the ones that are suffering under it more. And of course, they're going to try and do what they always do, which is sidestep the responsibility for the problem they've created and cast a net more disparagingly on the larger group of people and say, yeah, well, you know, it's my city and I've created grinding poverty, and it's my state and I've created grinding poverty. But, you know, the real problem is all those white people all across America. And it's bullshit. You know, you cannot blame the non-minority population in Minnesota for the grinding poverty that has been created in Queens by a Democratic mayor and a Democratic governor and Democratic senators operating under a largely Democratic presidency for the last 25 years or 40 years, a primarily democratically controlled federal government. It's ridiculous and it's counterintelligent, but you're going to see this narrative emerge. And as the body count rises, the left is going to do, the DNC is going to do what it's always going to do, which is try and point at the dead and say, you should be mad because of the dead that we had a hand in creating. You should be really, really mad. And now you should go and attack the people we point you at. Because yes, we were the ones in charge while you were dying, but it's their fault. And they managed to pull off that same magic trick every single time. And people fall for it over and over and over and over and over. And it's ridiculous. And I'm hoping it doesn't work this time, but it will. Because Corona is going to be in the news all the way through to November. The only good thing about it is that if this is the racial, inflammatory story that CNN and these guys decide to go with, then they don't have to invent one like they've done in summers past, where they have invented any number of racial stories throughout the summer to try and influence the November elections. At least we know what hill they're going to die on this time. To those of you watchers who are minorities, including my good friends who I have had disagreements and continue to have political disagreements with on these topics, if you've gotten this far into the video, I truly appreciate you listening to what I'm saying. I want you to remember and go back through and watch what I said. If you think I said something like that ever implied that minority populations were somehow deserve this or anything, that's not what I said. And that's what my critics will spell. That's what I'll get hate mail about. I guarantee you I'm going to get messages and DMs and people attacking me on Twitter and sending me the most hateful DMs you can imagine, telling me I'm some sort of racist redneck who's just happy that brown-skinned people are dying. I get that shit all the time, and it moves me not at all. I just want to make sure that the people who actually have a brain, who know me, pay attention to what I actually said. The only responsibility that I'm willing to lay at the feet of the populations in question is the responsibility I lay at the feet of everyone who's a voter, which is that population is overwhelmingly voted for the very politicians and the very group who has held them in that has been in charge for the 30 years that they've been in poverty. And I say to you the same thing that I said last election, which is look outside that bubble, see who's really maybe your friend and who's really maybe your enemy. And I would submit to you the belief that the most level playing field you could ever hope for is the one that says, if you're good, make money, everybody loves people that make money. That if all anybody cares about is how much you hustle, yes, we might be greedy. Yes, we might not care about, how nice a person you are. Yes, we might not care about whether you're good or bad to your parents. Yes, we might not, understand what a special snowflake you are and love your degree in pottery, whatever. And yes, we might not be particularly sensitive to the racial history of, hundreds of years ago. All those faults may be true. Maybe we're only maybe pure capitalist only judges people by how much work they do and how valuable they are and how smart they can be. But isn't that better? Wouldn't it be better to just be judged by those criteria than this constant one-upsmanship on who's the biggest victim and subdividing people by, race and then skin color, and then are you dark-skinned or lighter-skinned, and are you Native American or are you not Native American? What if you're Native American but dark-skinned and you're a girl? What if you're a Native American dark-skinned girl who's a lesbian? What if you're a Native American dark-skinned girl who's a guy, who's a trans person, who's now a girl, who's now a lesbian? And then what if you're all those things and you're also like a bipolar disorder, a neurotypical person who has one personality that thinks they're a polar bear? Like, if you start that craziness, you wind up with this. You wind up in a world where while we're trying to save the entire population, and we're working hard to do that at a level that has never been done in human history before. We've taken one of the most prosperous economies in the world and we've shut it down. We're blowing tens of trillions of dollars. We're causing untold economic disaster. People are dying. People are losing their businesses. People are losing their livelihood. And we have done that while less than 10,000 people are dead. And we are doing that to try and prevent future deaths. And to look into the face of everything we are doing as a nation and decide that this is the moment for you to look at those 6,000 dead at this point in time. It's between 6,000 and 7,000 people while I'm recording this. And go, you know what? You guys are all racist assholes because it turns out slightly more than the right number of brown people are dead in this group. So obviously, all the trillions of dollars, everything that's being done by millions of Americans, everything that's being voluntarily done all across the nation, none of that matters anymore because we're not doing a heroic thing as a nation. We're just racist assholes. It's horrible, and it's mean, and it's vicious, and it's evil, and it's how these people get and maintain power. And if we tolerate it, if we allow it to happen at this moment in time, we will never shut it down. Anyway, we're coming up on 20 minutes. I've ranted long enough. I hope everybody's staying safe. I wish the best for you and your families. If you're not feeling well, please take care of yourselves. Apolitically, I would ask that with whatever clout you have, I don't care who you're going to vote for president, but you definitely want to start pushing for the freedom to use the drugs that we know, statistically speaking, are reasonable. And if your state governor is trying to keep you from having access to this malaria drug cocktail because they want to jam a thumb in the eye of Donald Trump because Donald Trump said something nice about that drug once, you better rise up about that. Rise up about that. Get your hands on that. The ability for your doctor to prescribe you that drug. Save your family, save your friends, help the people you love. And then look, in November, we'll have another argument. We'll decide who you're going to vote for. I just want you to stay alive. And the way you're going to stay alive right now, the single most important thing you can do is take the one medical advantage we know we have, and you make sure that there is no one in government standing between you and having access to that, because they have an axe to grind and they want to look good on a news bite on CNN. All right. Love you guys. Stay safe. We'll talk to you next time.